it feels like every couple of years now, you're going to see a lot of people get overly excited over a mediocre game for not curtailing to feminist norms, right? For something that has a sexualized female protagonist or something that's like pornographic in nature or something that's like appealing to men or whatever. Like it feels more and more that I'm seeing mediocre products propped up in this way. Right, I just did a video, I just did a stream, like talking about Nier Automata, and how bad that game was, and how like nobody wanted to admit it because of the game's reputation and how popular the female lead was for its primarily male audience. But the game just wasn't good, right? Like that's the core issue with games like Nier Automata, right? The game itself is not good. And I think it's very obvious, considering what we're seeing with Stellar Blade right now, that Stellar Blade is just going to be a repeat of the same thing over again, right? It's going to have a terrible story. It's not going to be fun to play. It's going to have like all these it's not gonna look great. It's not gonna play great. Like even now, people are noticing that like, wow, we're not seeing a lot of gameplay for this one. People are bringing up the fact that the game just doesn't have enough gameplay shown off. But all anybody can think about are the cheeks, right? All anybody can think about are peaches, right? All anybody can think about is just like, oh man, it's a girl that actually looks like her model, right? Like all anybody can think about is that like, oh man, thank goodness that we don't have to deal with Manjaw Watson anymore, right? Like people are legit thankful they're getting attractive women in games, with completely ignoring the fact that like Nintendo has Fire Emblem and Bayonetta and like more attractive women in games in general. But like let's ignore the fact that Nintendo never did any of this anyway. That there are already better alternatives. Like let's ignore all that. Um, what about the gameplay? What about the gameplay of Stellar Blade is so impressive that you're getting excited about it? Like, there's nothing. Like, the reality is Stellar Blade simply isn't all that compelling as a video game. It offers nothing of value. It's not interesting. Uh, it's not doing anything new or original. It looks like a complete mess. Like, it looks like it's having all these problems. Even the producers seem kind of frustrated with the games, how the game is being received by the public, because people aren't like talking about the game. All anybody can think about is just like something that honestly is completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Like, oh, is the character attractive? Like, that's all anybody cares about. And the reason for that is because like people are so starved for good content. They don't even know necessarily what out there is good, right? Like they won't acknowledge that Nintendo exists. So they have to do this thing where they have to like try and convince themselves that like, oh, there are no attractive female characters at all. Like like I'm just gonna ignore like all these great Nintendo games. I'm gonna ignore Unicorn Overlord and Princess Peach Showtime and all this other better stuff. I'm gonna hype up Stellar Blade because I don't have anything else. Right? That is the situation we're seeing here with Stellar Blade, is that people are just desperately trying to keep up like the narrative that are desperately trying to prop up like any minor video game they possibly can. Right? Like they're trying to prop up anything on PlayStation as like the next big thing. And like we had the same kind of mindset when Nier Automata came out. Like it's the exact same behavior. Like the game doesn't look impressive. There's nothing good about it. But everyone's just gonna pretend the game is great because they really have nothing else to look forward to. And I do think it's getting worse because I've seen people like simp over gacha games. I've seen like people prop up like completely ridiculous games like Nier Automata. I've seen them like demonize games like Bayonetta 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 for allegedly like censoring female characters. Like I've seen people like, straight up say they're not going to support games based on the design of female characters. Like Maya from Dragon Quest Monsters, The Dark Prince. Like the big controversy with that game was that like she wears spats under her skirt, right? And like people were saying like they were going to boycott the game over it, but in the game she has like 2 lines. You see her like twice. Like she's not a relevant character at all, and yet you're gonna hedge your entire purchasing decision on like whether or not you can see whether or not she has underwear. Like, no, that's not how you should be evaluating these games, right? Like that, it's not important, like at all, and yet you consistently pretend it is, right? You pretend it's the most important thing, in fact, like so important that nothing else even really matters. So with that being said, like, is Stellar Blade going to be good? Like, no, of course not. Like, this is going to be a repeat of what's happened before with all these other games before it, right? Where like everybody will just latch onto it with no real comprehension or like respect as to what makes a game good. They're gonna ignore all the other better games that are coming out. They're just talking about Stellar Blade because like it's all they got, right? Like that's it. Like they're not getting anything else, honestly, probably for the entire generation, which is honestly kind of sad if you think about it. But it's been we've seen this happen over and over again with PlayStation games. Like it's crazy the amount of nonsense that people will put up with it, just as long as it's like the big approved game from game journalists, right? Again, like I'm curious like what's gonna lead this mindset to die, because I do think Stellar Blade is interesting, because I do think I've been seeing more people like address how ridiculous this is. Like I have seen a little bit of discourse on like the whole like sexualizing the female lead and stuff like that. I was thinking like when Atelier Ryza took off, when that became popular, like I really wonder if like the whole reputation the character had for having thick thighs, like I have to wonder if that was like a big part of its success or not. Like I really don't think it is, and honestly, like um I was kind of uncomfortable with like the way the character was being talked about. She's underage, by the way. Um, I was kind of uncomfortable with it, right? I thought it was kind of a crass thing to do, and like I was surprised when I saw like the producers speak out about it as well, how they were like planning on scaling it back for future releases, and a lot of people were like crying censorship, but I think in reality, like they're just tired of like the the attractiveness of the character being the only thing that anyone talks about, right? Like, what about like Ryza as a character? What about like what she goes through on her adventure? What about like her character development? What about like other characters? Like, what about the franchise as a whole? Right? Like, this is the issue with this and like series like Fatal Frame. Like, nobody seems interested in talking about the games themselves at all. It's entirely it's entirely based on this idea that uh, we have to the main thing that everyone seems to be interested in is talking about sex stuff, right? All anybody cares about is just like talking about cooming and talking about like how much they want to bang female characters. Like, why not talk about the games? Like, it's kind of shocking how little in comparison, how little I talk about female characters I like Samus Aran. I suppose I'm like not the the kind of person who like fetishizes female characters that much, but yeah, like I think it needs to stop. I do think it's embarrassing. I do think it's ridiculous. I do think it needs to be called out more for what it is. Like, it's straight up perversion, right? Like, respect female characters, bro.